first ever Field of 68 bracketology show. That's right. It is a new show from the Field of 68, presented, of course, by Bet Rivers. This is Fielding the 68. That's the clever name we came up with. We're talking bracketology, folks. I am Jim Root. I am the host today. It's going to be a rotating cast of characters on the show, but for today, you got me as the host, and I am flanked by two of the best bracketologists on the internet. Got Lukas Harkins from Heat Check, got Rocco Miller from bracketeer.org. These guys know their stuff. You can check them out. Their work is on Bracket Matrix. They are highly ranked up there. I know Lukas is third right now in the rankings. Rocco, you're 22nd, but as soon as we drop off 5 years ago, you're going to skyrocket up those rankings. I know you're ready for it. Are you looking forward to that? I assume skyrocketing up those rankings.
That's right, Jim. And, unfortunately, it's time to tell the world what happened. I was in Vegas for the Pac-12 tournament that year. Little bit hungover and didn't have a good performance on that selection Sunday, but obviously wrote the ship, and proud to say I'm one of two that's gotten a 350 plus the last 4 years. So we're ready to roll from here on out.
I love it. And then Lukas, of course, does great work at Heat Check. He was formerly with Busting Brackets. He knows his stuff. Both these guys are doing brackets every single week, so they are clued into the process. We're going to talk one seeds. We're going to talk bubble. We're going to talk some specific teams that I myself have questions about for them. And then we're going to try to get a little bit of chat at the end. I see we have Alex Jesswine already asking about Marquette. So fellas, I hope you have some scintillating, scorching takes ready for the Golden Eagles. We'll get to them a little bit later. But first, let's start off with the one seeds. Let's not mess with a great process. The selection show gets it right. They start with the one seeds. We will do the same. Lukas, I'm going to start with you. First, I want to get your 4 1 seeds. We'll get Rocco's. And then I want to talk a little bit about what you guys are looking for with the one seeds and some of the fringe contenders for it. So, Lukas, let's start with you.
Yeah, my ones right now, I'm looking at Auburn, Gonzaga, Baylor, and Kansas. Even with their loss, still sticking with Kansas.
Okay. Rocco, what are your 4?
Yeah, I'm going with Auburn, Gonzaga, Baylor, and Purdue, and mainly going with Purdue over Kansas because I do like what Purdue's been able to do away from home. They got the win at Illinois. They got the win at Iowa. They got a neutral court over Villanova, who's also an elite team, and the North Carolina game counts for something as well. I just think it edges out a little bit more of what Kansas does, and Kansas did take a little bit of a hit in what we call the quality metrics, which are the predictives. We'll get into that, which are your KenPoms and the like, with that blowout home loss to Kentucky. So I do give Purdue just a little bit of the nod. Very close.
All right. So then to you, Lukas, what gets Kansas above Purdue for you? And is Purdue your 5th team?
Yes, Purdue is my number 5 right now. They're my first team off the one line. But I think Purdue, I side with Rocco on they have the edge in quality metrics. They probably have the edge in top tier wins, but I think Kansas kind of has that edge in the second tier. So they're 5-1 in quadrant 2. They're 10-3 in quads 1 and 2 combined. Purdue's 7-3. So that's my angle with Kansas right now, but I think they're really close. I think just about every bracketologist should agree on the other 3 1 seeds, but that last one's a little bit up in the air.
How close are, especially the top 2? They feel like pretty darn close to locks. Like both Gonzaga and Auburn can maybe take a loss or 2 and stay there. Baylor just lost to Alabama this weekend. Are they at all close to sinking off there, or where do you see that? Rocco, I'll start with you on that one.
Not at this point. I mean, the way Auburn's playing, I think they've got up to 17, 18 wins in a row at this point, and they're just building up all the quality wins. Right now, they're 9-1 in away neutral games, which it just blows away the entire board. I think the next closest team is Baylor at 8-1. And also Wisconsin out there at 8-1 down the board a little bit. But you also look at so many other things. They have the number 1 strength of record. They're 4-0 in Q1, Q2 away games. If you look at all 3 quadrants combined, 15-1. I mean, they've just done so much. They just stacked so many chips. That's the hard part for Gonzaga to catch them. Obviously, we know what Gonzaga is capable of. They're number 1 in all the quality metrics. And then when you look at Baylor, I'll just throw them in real quick as the 3rd. They actually have 9 wins against the projected field, or my projected field. And that blows away the competition. Next highest team has 7. So to me, that shows Baylor's the clear number 3.
Is that something you manually calculate each time, Rocco? Just the wins versus your field?
Embarrassingly, yes, I do. We talked before the show. There's a couple things I do very manually, but I guess the good thing, Jim, is that it does stick to the brain. So when we get on these fun shows, I can just pop out the information. But yeah, I do a very manual process, old school guy.
I do it the same way for bets and handicapping. So I agree. Sometimes you need to like write it out and do the math yourself. It makes it stick more. Lukas, just quick question on Gonzaga, because they're in the West Coast Conference, which much maligned, fair or unfair, I would say unfair. Are they more at risk of dropping just because one loss for them could be a little more harmful, or does it really depend who it's against and where it takes place?
I would say in a normal year that they would be. But right now, they just have such an advantage in quality metrics that like they're number one across the board in BPI, Sagarin, and KenPom right now. And even one loss probably still keeps them there. At least I want to say they have like a 3-point advantage in KenPom over number 2. So yeah, it would hurt, but I think it'll be hard for the committee to overlook a team that's probably going to be 1 or 2 in every single one of those metrics on Selection Sunday.
Yeah, that seems reasonable. It does seem like the predictive stuff, they want to have that up there. They don't want to unfairly knock that team down. One team like that right now is Houston, who's way up there in predictive metrics. I assume that they have not quite gotten into the conversation for a 1 seed for you guys. We can probably talk about them a little more later, but Rocco, just real quick, with a team with such strong predictive metrics like that, are they more able to rapidly move up the seed list if they pick up a few big wins?
Well, Jim, I think that's a great question, because I think with Houston, we saw a very similar thing last year, as Wichita State was the second AAC team in, and they were a barely in first 4 team, kind of a similar formula going on this year where they're just racking up a lot of blowout wins. Their net keeps going up. I think they're number 2 in the net this morning. I want to give Lukas a ton of credit because I think he's mastered the quality metrics element of this. This is all very new. The net was introduced in 2019. And this is, gone away from tradition of looking at the full body of work in the resume. You have to look at Houston a little bit differently than the rest of the Power 6 teams. So as teams continue to beat up on each other above Houston, Houston will actually benefit. We saw them get all the way up to a 2 seed last year. I can totally see that this year.
Yeah, that's a good point. And Lukas, with the net, I know the NCAA likes to say that it is primarily or almost exclusively a sorting tool. How much does the ranking matter to you there, or is it truly just the sorting tool?
I think it did more in the past. I think I looked at the net a little bit stronger the last couple of years than I am this year. I did a little bit of analysis on what kind of metrics matter along each seed line, and the net really doesn't play as big a factor in terms of seeding as the resume and predictive metrics do. So I haven't actually put a whole lot of stock in the net this year, outside of obviously where you land in quadrant records. But unless there's like a giant gap, maybe like look at like a Miami this year is down there pretty low in the net. Outside of that, there's not as much of an impact as the others.
Yeah, I could see a discussion will be had in a little bit, I think, on Providence, perhaps, as somebody that might be a candidate that's net might not match its resume. But before we get to some of the specific team discussions, let's talk bubble. I mean, that is always an area of big interest. Last 4 in, first 4 out. So we're going to get that from each of you here, kind of the same way we did 1 seeds. We'll talk about some of the discrepancies, any teams that maybe just missed for you, or even like some of the teams that are just hanging on to those last 4 buys. I know that's a tenuous position as well, especially at this point in the season. A long way to go. So this time, let's start with Rocco. Let's get your last 4 in into the field right now.
Yeah. So for this morning, Jim, the last 4 in my bracketology is North Carolina, Oregon, San Diego State, and BCU. And that last choice was tough. And, I want the audience to understand there's a big difference between selection and seeding. And this question is all about selection and very little to do with seeding. These are the last 4 teams in. You could say the same thing probably about the next 4 above them. And when it comes down to it, I look at this BCU team versus like a Wake Forest or a Creighton, who I have in my next 4 out. And I just love the fact that you got 4 great wins away from home, anchored by that Davidson road win recently. They also have Dayton, Vandy, Richmond, all qualifying in that top 2 quadrant. If you look at the rest of the bubble, there's no other teams besides Boise State, who's pretty far up at this point, with 4 wins away from home in the top 2 quadrants. Then you look at the rest of the picture. They're right there in the mid-40s in predictives. They're right there in the mid-50s in their own net. I think it's enough there to warrant BCU selection, especially when you simulate a committee discussion about the Ace Baldwin Jr. situation. I just think that the more they would discuss that, and these are the discussions that last the longest in the committee room, I think VCU gets the nod, but that's just where I'm at today.
Yeah, VCU is really interesting too, because I think a lot of these was the guy in or out lineup discussions are he goes in, then he's out, then he's back in. Like this is a very defined line of the team with Baldwin and the team without. So Lukas, how much do you consider a VCU before Baldwin? Is that like completely thrown out? Are we still worried about that loss at home to Chattanooga? What do you think that happens in the committee room? Are they really debating that?
Yeah, I think that there certainly plays a factor there. And I think that's something that probably gets brought up. I also have VCU in my last 4 in right now.
Just hit us with your last 4 in. Let's do that.
So my last 4 in right now, I'm actually a little bit tired on Rocco. I have VCU as my 4th last team in, along with Mississippi State, Wyoming, and North Carolina. A lot of the same points Rocco made with VCU, along the lines with Baldwin. And I think that they're 5-5 in quads 1 and 2, which isn't bad overall. I think that they've had a pretty decent season overall. And you mentioned a loss to Chattanooga, but they're 39th in the net too. So they've had a really nice season, boosting those numbers for them. As far as Wyoming and North Carolina, you almost cannot get further than each other for the last 2 spots for me. Wyoming, I give an edge because they have quality metrics. Their resume metrics are up there much higher than most in the country right now on the bubble. And I think in the past, we've seen the committee put a preference towards those resume metrics like the KPI and strength of record as you get closer to the bubble. As for North Carolina, I did research prior to the season and in the middle of the season where generally if you just evenly weight quality metrics versus your resume metrics, you're within 2 seed lines at about an 85% rate. And North Carolina, just with that average, is at an 8 seed right now. So they're in my last 4 teams in, but I actually find it hard to believe they would get maybe lower than 11 just based off of how good their metrics are.
Yeah, that's fair. Rocco, is it similar to you with the selection versus seeding? Especially right now, we're just kind of focused on selection with these last 4 teams. Are you looking more at resume than the predictive stuff? Because it feels like that's what should matter more. Like, what did this team accomplish rather than what could they do?
Yeah, definitely. I'm only really looking at resume in these last 4 decisions and even up to 5 and 6. I think Wake Forest is a good example for me. If all things considered, besides their strength of schedule, I would probably have them as like either the 4th or 5th team in. But I just know historically no team over 275 plus in that out of conference strength of schedule metric has ever been selected that late in the selection process unless they get up to a 10 or a 9. Wake Forest was there on Friday, but going out and getting blown out over the weekend against a non-tournament team, Syracuse, threw a bunch of their metrics off, threw some of the other numbers off, and right now they're just too close to the cut line for me to include them. I'd much rather select a VCU like I talked about. So to me, it's everything. Lukas brings up a lot of good points on seeding. And, I think he's performed exceptionally well in the matrix because his ability to grasp the seeding, especially in the middle part of the bracket. I think I come in pretty strong when it comes to selection just because I was pretty proud. I got Wichita State and Drake matchup right last year. I think only like 10 of us got that one. But, just little silly things that we all like to specialize in. But I really like to sink my teeth into what the committee's talking about for these last bids, what they actually care about, what history's taught us. I actually have, I think, the last 10 years of chairman interviews recorded. I always go back and watch those because the next chairman to the following year seemed to say the same thing. So, yeah, I definitely look at that first.
This is why you guys have lapped me in terms of my ability to do bracketology. I used to love. I don't have the historical research that you guys have done. Having those chairman interviews, that is next level. That's why you succeed at it. That's why we have you on here talking bracketology. You mentioned Wake Forest as a team just out. Is that one of the teams that's in your first 4 out, Rocco?
Yeah, they'd be my first team out. And I think, again, their non-conference strength of schedule is 326. There's no historical precedent that would allow them to be like a 10, 11, or a last 4 team in with that bad of a non-conference strength of schedule. I know today we have 358 teams. We didn't always have 358. But we always had over 300. And I think the stat is somewhere around 275 plus. We'll just call it 300 plus for sake of argument. And, they got a couple nice road wins at VTech and Virginia, but those are not tournament teams. I think what Wake Forest really needs to do is get a road win at a tournament caliber team like a Miami, maybe even a Florida State or somebody. Florida State's not there today, but, if you just imagine, maybe get a win at Duke. I'm not sure if they go there, but they really need something to push them over the top so this doesn't become an issue like it is right now.
Yeah, you mentioned, so we have Wake Forest, and the other three you have out, your first four out on the screen. UAB, Stanford, and Creighton. Is there anything that one of those four teams can specifically do? Like Wake Forest can't really change their non-conference strength of schedule. That's out of their hand right now. Is there something that UAB or Creighton or Stanford can do to really get themselves up into the field more securely?
UAB's just got to keep winning, and unfortunately, they got that Rice loss and the Marshall loss now. They've already got the big win at North Texas. That might be the best available win, and they got the Louisiana Tech road win. So I think they've already got the best available wins in Conference USA. I think when you're in a position like UAB in a 1 to 1.5 bid league, all you can do is keep winning and hope for chaos around you. So much of it's out of their control at this point, unfortunately. The one thing I do like about UAB, the reason I have them close to the cut line, is they have a win at SLU, they have a win at North Texas, and the La Tech road win, which are three really good road wins. It actually measures out favorably against a lot of the rest of the cut line teams, just inside, just outside. So if they can stay the course, keep their net in the 40s, they're 43 right now, they've got a shot. You look at a Stanford team, Jim, a Stanford team that's got 4 wins over the field. If you count both USC wins, if you consider Wyoming as a tournament team and Oregon as a tournament team, if those those 3 teams stay in the field, Stanford's got something that most bubble teams don't have with those wins. Now they just got to play better basketball because their own net is still 90. But if that starts to improve, they play better basketball, they can play their way in.
Yep. Right with you on that. All right, Lucas, let's get your first 4 teams out. Who did you leave just outside? They're going to be begging on Selection Sunday.
So my first 4 out right now are Florida, Belmont, SMU, and then Oregon. And I'm also right with Rocco with UAB as my 5th team out.
Oh, I love we've got a bunch of different teams here. Let's start, I guess, with a couple of that you did not have, or that Rocco did not have. I'm intrigued by SMU because there's a chance the American is a 1-bid league right now, and it probably is as it stands. Can they get in without beating Houston, or do they absolutely need to get at least one Houston win on the resume?
I think they probably need that win over Houston. But there's also, as Rocco makes the case for UAB, it's kind of that team in a conference that's 1.5 bids right now, where they kind of need to root for chaos outside of that. Their advantage over a team like UAB, though, is having the opportunities against Houston as the season progresses. Because even splitting those games is a huge win.
Yep. Rocco, what about Belmont here? One of the teams that's just out. Is that somebody that you considered? Obviously, they're kind of in the boat of not having big opportunities coming up. Where do you stand on the Bruins?
Yeah, I mean, I like this Bruins team. Unfortunately, they fell short against Moorhead and Murray in recent weeks. And so right now they're sitting in a situation where they're 7th out. So they're not totally out of the picture. They still carry some nice metrics. They're 55 in strength of record, which is important for selection. 44th in net themselves. Again, I like Lucas's point about the net. And the way I think about it is if you're on a smaller league, your own net actually matters a lot because it becomes more of like a de facto comparison tool, even because you just don't have a lot of ways to compare Belmont to Notre Dame, right? So their own net can start to represent something. Obviously, the strength of record does as well for selection. The thing you like about Belmont is if Iona stays strong, and who knows how long Iona can keep winning every single game for, but that still shows up as a quality win in the Q1. They've got 3 wins in the first 2 Qs. They'll get another crack at Murray. Obviously, they can win the auto bid, but this conversation is obsolete if they do. Belmont's still hanging around. And we saw them hang around a couple of years ago, 2019, and they ended up sneaking into the first 4. So it is doable.
How much of it, Lucas, is when you're doing this, like it's absolutely where the team stands today, but with a team like Belmont or even UAB is sort of in a similar discussion. Are you considering, I don't know how much higher this team can go from where they're at right now. So do you even start to write them off because you know that they don't have a ton of upward mobility as opposed to some in the Big 12 that just has to pick up big wins? If they win games, it's a big win. How does that comparison work for you in terms of projecting it forward versus just doing a photo in time right now today?
Yeah, so I think this is kind of a difference between my bracketology and my bubble watch. Where with bracketology, it's more of a snapshot in time with obvious some leanings towards some predictive metrics at different times. Whereas bubble watch looks a little bit more in advance of where they're at schedule-wise. So like for Belmont, they still have a road game against Murray State on the schedule. And I think Belmont kind of has, as Rocco talked about with Iona, they probably have the best collection of just randomly awesome mid-major wins in the country. Like they have wins over Furman, Drake, Iona, St. Louis, Chattanooga. Like that's a lot of good wins, not great, but good wins. And as a result, they've piled up a 5-5 record in quads 1 and 2. And in a twisted way, getting blown out by Murray State has made that a quad 1 loss.
Yeah, you'd rather get blown out by Murray State than lose by 1 to them because you've built them up. That's good.
And now if you beat them on the road, it's a really good win late in the season. It's February 24th. It's their second to last regular season game. And that might build up enough goodwill heading into the conference tournament where if they lose to Murray in the OVC championship, we could see them sneak in as an 11 or 12 seed. Now, I don't see them at all getting to a single-digit seed, but as Rocco talked about a couple of years ago, sneaking in that first 4 wouldn't surprise me. And unlike last year, their quality metrics are excellent.
Yep. Agreed. All right, so we got bubble, we got 1 seeds. Let's pivot to just a little bit of a games to watch. We'll go some team specific discussions after this. I got some names I want to throw at you guys. We'll have a few from the chat, but some games to watch ahead of there'll be another show on Friday, same time. So this is going to be Monday and Friday, 6 p.m. Eastern. But in the intermittent time from now until Thursday, what are some of the biggest games you're watching for? It can be tonight, can be this week in terms of bubble, in terms of seeding. Lucas, I'll go to you first. Are there any games that you're really specifically clued in on?
Wyoming's entire week is the number one thing for me. They get to go, Colorado State at home and they get Boise State at home. And those are 2 opportunities against Mountain West teams that are probably going to make the tournament or are in the tournament conversation that can really boost the team that's currently my last 4 in. They've played really well of late. They only lost by 3 at Boise State this past week. I think that those 2 games are huge for their at-large resume, especially because there's not a whole lot to get there in the Mountain West. TCU and Oklahoma have both kind of risen up into my single-digit seed territory, but those are winnable games in a really tough Big 12 where you're going to have to at least amount of some victories. You can't just rely on close losses. Texas A&M and Tennessee. Look at Texas A&M as a team that's probably in the first 8 to 12 teams out, but has an opportunity on the road against a team that dominates in metrics. Tennessee is maybe more metrics heavy than their resume than anyone in the top 5 or 6 seed lines for me. And San Francisco, another team that's kind of slid a bit recently after getting their loss to St. Mary's, which they probably should have had for most of that game. They big chance on the road against the BYU team that also just took a big loss.
Yep. Those are all great ones. Rocco, do you have any more to add? Or you in agreement on all those?
Very much in agreement. I think Lukas took 75% of my games, and I
love that. How dare you?
No, it's all good. I got a few more to throw at you, Jim. So Notre Dame, right now they're 5th, 6th out. I think they're 6th out for me. But anyway, outside looking in, but they're starting to play better. They got a nice win over Virginia. They're starting to beat up on the middle of the ACC. It's starting to improve their opportunity. You got that win over Kentucky looks even better now than it did just last week after what Kentucky did to Kansas. So now you got to start proving yourself away from home. Tonight they get another marquee opportunity with Duke at home, and then turn around Wednesday, get down to Coral Gables, another big road opportunity at Miami Wednesday night. That's a tough turnaround. You're the handicapper. You probably know that's probably a tough spot for them, but it's all about opportunity. And the other thing about Notre Dame that struck me is, since I have Wake Forest out right now, the entire rest of their schedule after Wednesday, as of right now, they do not play another team in the projected field. So the pressure's on. They got to at least get one of these 2 and then win a lot of games from here. So that's definitely something to watch for. I also have the Wyoming thing down, and of course, San Francisco, team I follow closely. And UCLA, Arizona Thursday, going back to the top of the board. Right now, I have them both as number 2 seeds. If UCLA goes to Tucson and gets that win, their profile starts to get even more elite. It'll become more and more difficult to keep them off the 1 line, I believe. Flip side, if Arizona gets that win, they were already on the 1 line about a week ago. If they get another elite win, which UCLA would qualify as a quad 1A, they start to look at a 1 seed themselves. So really an opportunity. The winner's going to get a 1 seed. Tough environment there in McHale. Should be a heck of a ball game regardless. And if nobody mentions Texas tomorrow, Goodman's going to kill us. So obviously that game's got some sort of relevance to it.
I'm glad you brought up UCLA Arizona because I should have done that during our 1 seed discussion and I blew it as a host. So I'm glad I got you guys picking up my slack. I appreciate that. All right. That is it. That's good for bubble. Let's start to talk some specific teams here. I've got a little pet segment that I call hiring and firing. It's because I want you to either go to bat for a resume, somebody that you would hire based on a strong resume, or something you want to get rid of, or you're just down on. Basically, we're using bracket matrix as a proxy for where the market stands on each one of these teams. And I'm just going to have you each pick one, either that you're higher on or lower on, and just tell me why this resume is better or worse than where the bracket matrix has it. So Lukas, I'll go to you. Is there one team that you just seem to differ from what everybody else thinks?
Yeah, I think I'll hire Arkansas. They've been playing really well recently. They still don't really have that quad one quality-ish. They're 1-3 in quad one. Their metrics are all really good. They're all in the top 40 except for strength of record. They're now 6-3 in quads 1 and 2, and they're playing really well. They've reached a single-digit seed territory for me, and I would say the same about TCU, who I also almost hired. But I think the Razorbacks are trending in a really good direction. They've kind of figured it out, I think. And they're in a league that they can acquire some quality wins down the stretch and move up even higher, back to maybe what we thought they were when they started off really well against the weak strength of schedule.
Yeah, I think I had the perception in my head of, they took a couple home losses in the non-con, like the Hofstra one, of course, stands out. It's like, yeah, they're probably towards the bubble. But as I went through it yesterday, I was like, oh, this is a solid resume relative to the other ones around them. So I think that's a great answer.
A 6-game streak helps any bubble team.
It sure does. Yeah, especially in that league, because some of those wins are of definite quality.
Home win over West Virginia too, out of conference.
Yep. All right, Rocco, what about you? Is there a team you want to go to bat for, or you can choose to be the glass half empty guy and tell me about somebody you're not into?
Yeah, well, let's go glass empty, even though that's never my MO. So, when we see each other in New Orleans, I won't be that way. But for the purpose of the show, let's go with Iowa State. So Iowa State, I've actually been higher on them, I think, than the majority of the bracket matrix, I guess, for the last few weeks. I've only done 4 bracket posts thus far, but what I'm noticing here this morning is you start to compare them to teams like Tennessee, Texas, Ohio State, Xavier, UConn, Illinois, the teams that are right there in their same mix. Even though Iowa State has more wins over the field, which I traditionally care about a lot, folks like Lukas has taught me, if your predictive / quality metrics are in the 30s, 40s, and these other teams are in the teens, closer to 10, like Tennessee right now, for example, is 11 1/3, and Iowa State's 39 1/3. Now, Iowa State's got the better resume, I guess you could say, just because they have the 5 wins over the field. Tennessee just has 4. But everything else screams Tennessee gets a higher seed. And everything the committee taught us last year screams Tennessee gets a higher seed. Because of that, I have Iowa State losing a lot of these comparisons and dropping all the way down to a 7 this morning.
It's fair. I think that's a good point on Iowa State. And real quick, let's do it once and for all. We don't really care about conference record, right? Like if you're in the Big 12 and you're going 8-10, that's better than going 11-7 in the ACC, right? So we're all in agreement there.
Yeah, Jim, the conference record does not show up on the team sheet. So I know Lukas and I and several others, we just go off of what's on the team sheet and try to act as if we are the committee. So it's never discussed. It's never talked about.
I have conference record does not matter and copy paste for all of March.
Because I'm sure people are going to throw that at you when you're high on a team that's 6-8 in the Big 12 or something. It's like, yeah, but look at everything they did non-conference. That all matters too.
Yeah, you can't argue that Gonzaga plays in a bad conference and argue for a team that has an under 500 record at the same time.
Yes, people like to talk out of both sides of their mouth with that for some reason. I don't understand why. Okay, a couple of teams that I want to discuss quick, and some of these overlap with the chat, so we'll get to a couple questions from there too. How close for both of you, and maybe I'll start with Lukas, but I want to hear, Rocco, what you think too. How close is Michigan to the field? A team that coming into the year was projected really, really highly, has still pretty strong predictive metrics and stuff, but that resume isn't great. The record's not great. Lukas, where do you stand on the Wolverines right now?
Yeah, I think Michigan's in my probably first 8 to 10 out right now. But I think they're in a spot where I wouldn't be that surprised if they still ended up on a 9 or a 10 seed line with the way things out. Because if they get their resume to a point where it's going to make a tournament, where they're going to make the tournament, then their quality metrics are really going to stand out amongst the rest of the bubble. Right now, they're definitely a step behind. I think they're 71 in strength of record. They're 2-7 in quads 1 and 2. Like their resume is not there. I think that's pretty clear. But if they find themselves among the teams that get selected on Selection Sunday, I think we'll see them seated higher than perhaps that last 4 in.
Agree, Rocco, do you agree there?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a couple ways to answer a team like Michigan. So like the way I do bracketology, just for the record, is it's all based on if the season ended right this second. So right now they're 10th to 12th out for me. However, when you play in a league like the Big Ten, I cheated here, Michigan still plays Purdue twice, Ohio State twice, Iowa twice, Illinois once, a bunch of other big games. I mean, if you're comparing them to like St. Bonaventure or St. Louis or Fresno State, who's kind of in their ballpark right now, those teams don't even get a fraction of those opportunities. So let's just imagine Michigan picks up, I just listed 7 big games. They go 3-4 in those games. The metrics, of course, are only going to go up. Then you start comparing them. Right now, they already have 2 wins over the field. They've beaten San Diego State and Indiana on the road. So you add 3 more to that pile. You have a team here all of a sudden on the bubble with 5 wins against the field. And that's where Lukas is 100% right, because then you go from like being first 4 in all the way up to a 9 seed, because all these 10s and 11s can't compare to a team that has 5+ wins against the field.
They each have more mobility. It seems like a team like that has more mobility from where they are to where they can get to.
Michigan kind of feels like where Arkansas was 2 weeks ago.
Oh, I like that. I like that comparison, because if they go on their a little 5-game winning streak of their own,
all of a sudden
they're single digit seed,
5 and 10 bomb, and they're probably sitting around an 8 or 9 line. So yeah, I totally get having them out of the field right now, and I do too. But they're a team that moves quick, I think, if they get hot.
Absolutely.
All right, let's do a couple other questions. Teams that got mentioned in the chat. Michigan was definitely mentioned, and the same person asked about Virginia Tech. Maybe the ultimate, let's ignore conference record. Please, let's ignore conference record. That's what they're hoping for. They do need to rack up wins. Rocco, can they get to the field, though, at this point, or are they just maybe a little too far?
I think they're pretty far. I mean, you look at the across the board quadrant records, you're 0-3 against the first quadrant. If you combine the first 2, they're 2-7. Then you combine the first 3, they're 5-8. Or sorry, you combine 2A. Let me back up. 2-7 against 2A and 1 combined. Then you get the first 2 combined, they're 5-8. Then you go to the first 3 combined, they're 6-10. They're 4 games under 500 against all 3 of the first quadrants. I mean, that is a big problem. It's going to take a long time just to catch up and kind of balance that out. And you can't go back and change the loss to Boston College. You can't go back and change the home loss to NC State. You are what your resume says you are. So for Virginia Tech, unfortunately, they need to get super hot, and there's very little, if any, margin for error.
All right, Lukas, a question for you. You mentioned San Francisco going to BYU. Where are they at right now? Are they in, or are they needing to get a win or 2 more in the WCC to get there?
I have both in right now, but I think you're more asking about San Francisco, who I have on the 11 line. I had them single-digit seed until late last week, so I think that they've been playing well. They have a decent enough resume. They're 4-4 in quads 1 and 2, 1 loss outside of those quadrants. Their metrics are pretty good across the board. I think, generally speaking, they're just ahead of the rest of the bubble in basically every category, but they don't have anything that's really buoying them. It's not like they have outstanding quality metrics that they're going to stay there the whole season, or outstanding resume metrics. They're just kind of right in the mix with every other bubble team, and they just, for now, have those advantages. I'm not sure, like, the problem with the WCC for them is that they could just drop another head-scratching game, like BYU dropped a head-scratching game last week. If San Francisco does that, they don't have the same goodwill built up that a BYU or St. Mary's, obviously Gonzaga, does in the league.
Yep. All right, Rocco, San Francisco or BYU? Pick one right now. Where are you at with them? BYU just lost to Pacific. I saw that just got mentioned in the chat. Where do you have those two?
I just think BYU's, I got BYU 38, San Francisco 41, both safely in the field. 38 equates to a 10, 41 equates to the top 11. So very similar. The reason I have BYU a little higher, they still have 4 wins against the field, including a win on the Hilltop against the Dons. Also included in that list is St. Mary's, San Diego State, and Oregon.
All right, let's do 1 or 2 more questions here from the chat, and then we'll shut it down and save some of the other lively debates for the Friday show. We don't want to hog all the content from those guys. A team that's been mentioned multiple times, Lukas, is Marquette. They are definitely surging. Despite the loss at Providence, they've been playing really well, had a phenomenal January. What's their floor and ceiling as in terms of a seed? Do you have a sense of that yet? Or are you still kind of waiting for more of the season to develop?
I think Marquette's kind of in a similar vein as the way Rocco talked about Iowa State. They're really strong collection of wins came at different times, but Marquette's kind of in that same boat. 8-7 in quads, 1 and 2, 5 quad 1 wins, but metrics mostly in the 30s and 40s. In terms of predictive, they're probably going to finish with a good spot in the Big East, but in the Big East is a good conference, but it doesn't really take away the fact that they really struggled in mid to late December. And those things are still going to be on the resume in a month and a half. So I think I have Marquette currently on my 6 line. I could see them maybe getting up to a 4 or 5, and I don't think I'll see them dropping out of single digit seeds without a collapse.
All right, let's close the team that pre-show. I could tell maybe you guys weren't quite on the same seed line with, and it's because they've been all over the place. Like they've played well at times, they've played poorly at times. That's Alabama. They could potentially own wins against 3 number 1 seeds, like the top 3 seeds. If they are able to knock off Auburn coming up here, already hold the wins over Gonzaga and Baylor. A Houston win too is elite, but they've dropped some mind-numbing games, including to my Missouri Tigers. So Rocco, tell us where you have Alabama, why you have them there, and then we'll let Lukas rebuttal as well.
Yeah, so since this is our first episode, Jim, I think it'd be great to just explain real quick what a quad 1A win is. If you watch games on TV, you hear quad 1, quad 2, but you never really hear about the split. So a 1A win is an elite win. It's a top 15 home win, a top 25 neutral win, or a top 40 away win. Okay, so is everybody clear on what that is? Alabama has 6 of these. The next closest team in the entire country has 4. So Alabama, even though they're schizophrenic in terms of their losses, losing at UGA, losing at Mizzou, your boys, Jim, they've got a road win, which is, I'm counting the Gonzaga game as a road win. I know the committee's going to call it a neutral. I'm originally from Seattle. I know that was 18,000 Gonzaga fans going crazy, and Alabama still beat them. They just beat Baylor, by the way, who's also a 1 seed. So anytime you get a team with that many wins, okay, so that many wins, and 2 of them are against number 1 seeds, I think that's already starting to enter the conversation of a protected seed, which is the top 4 seed lines. Here's the other thing about Alabama. This is the 2nd year in a row they didn't play a single quad 4 game, not one. And they're the only team in the country either year to do that. And I think the committee really respects that, appreciates that. And so if you're debating Alabama or LSU or somebody else close to the 4, Alabama wins out because of those reasons, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think Nate Oates is maybe regretting not playing any Q4 games. He's had some pressers where he's been like, man, the schedule, who did this? But Lukas, I think you're a little lower on the Tide, and it's, maybe because of those losses, but where do you have them and where do you push back against where Rocco has?
First of all, man who did this as he's about to play at Auburn and Kentucky at home this week. So for me, I had Alabama when I submitted my bracket yesterday for the show. I had Alabama on the 6 line, and then I have since convinced myself I'm wrong. And I lean more towards, I think, Rocco, you have Alabama on the 4 line, right?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, I have Bama on my 5 right now, and I think that's really due to those losses. And the more I think about it, though, I think you're right on with just at this point they're already going to make the tournament. That's clear. Their selection is fine at this standstill. And I think with their quality of wins, it's hard to really debate them really being much lower than a 5 seed. And I think I have them on the 5 right now, and my actual official update will go out for heat check tomorrow. And by that point, I could easily see them up under the 4 line. And as I mentioned, their week this week is murderous. At Auburn, at home against Kentucky are 2 games that they're probably underdogs in both. I would think, right, Jim? You're our betting guy.
Yeah. And they're probably there's a chance they end up with 8 of those Q1A wins after this week.
And if they do that, they will get so close. They will ride. They'll be the best 7-loss team in the country by far. And they'll probably on the 3 line, if not higher, if they win both those games somehow. They're a team that I think is probably the most likely to jump or stay steady this week. They have huge opportunities that don't hurt you.
Yep. I think that makes sense. All right. Let's wrap this up. This was a great first show, guys. I appreciate you joining. We've got another one coming on Friday. We've got, I can't actually remember who the host is, but we've got 2 more great bracketologists. We got Jonathan Warner from, was it Busting Brackets? Like, why is that not coming to me? Jonathan, thank you. Making the Madness. Appreciate it. And then Andy Bottoms, he is also one of the elite ranked bracketologists in that bracket matrix. So plenty more discussion to come Friday at 6 p.m. Eastern. After this show ends, we'll be releasing a consensus field of 68 bracket. So that's been assembled via Lucas's rankings, Rocco's rankings, and also Andy and Jonathan. So it's kind of going to have a little bit of a matrix feel to it, where you get all these opinions meshed into one consensus bracket that we think closely approximates what the committee will do. So keep an eye out for that. Hopefully everybody liked this show. We're going to have, like I said, more of them coming in the future. Thank you everyone for tuning in. Thank you to the Field of 68 for giving us the opportunity here. And thank you to Bet Rivers for sponsoring. This was our first Fielding the 68 episode. A lot more to come. Hope to